Welcome to Fog Street Mysteries. Don't forget to share thoughts. Now let's begin. Nero Wolfe and the Forbidden Chamber, a locked room mystery. Nero Wolfe detective story. Chapter 1, The Door That Never Opened. If you spend enough years working for Nero Wolfe, you learn to tell the difference between a client who wants justice and one who wants absolution. The first usually brings facts. The second brings money and a look like he's already standing at the edge of the gallows. The man who showed up at the brownstone that Tuesday afternoon had the second look nailed. He arrived 5 minutes before 4, which already put him on Wolfe's bad side. Fritz was in the kitchen conducting one of his sacred late-afternoon rituals. The orchids upstairs were being misted on schedule, and Wolfe was installed in his red leather armchair like a territorial monument. I was at my desk, shuffling papers, and enjoying the rare peace that comes just before trouble rings. The bell. It rang. That I opened the door and found a tall man in an expensive overcoat that had never seen rain without complaining about it. His face was pale in that carefully maintained way, money pale, not sick pale, and his eyes kept flicking past me as if the house itself might overhear him. "Archie Goodwin," I said, "because that's what I do." "You're early." "I had to come," he said. "Today." That was my first clue. Nobody has to come to Nero Wolfe. They choose to, usually after running out of better options. That I took his hat, his coat, and about 2 seconds to decide he was carrying something heavier than fear. Guilt, maybe. Or a secret that didn't like daylight. Inside, Wolfe didn't move. He rarely does for first impressions. The client took one look at him, 6 feet of genius wrapped in yellow silk pajamas, and swallowed hard. "You may sit," Wolfe said, not bothering to look up from the papers on his lap. "Mr. Goodwin, beer." "I brought the beer." Wolfe sipped. Silence stretched. The client shifted. "My name is Caldwell," the man finally said. "Leonard Caldwell." Wolfe grunted. Encouragement from Wolfe usually sounds like indigestion. "I live on East 67th Street, Caldwell continued. "A private residence. Family home." "Yes," Wolfe said. "You have a problem." Caldwell's hands clenched. "There is a room in that house," he said. "A chamber. It has been sealed for 20 years. That got my attention." 20 years is a long time to hold your breath. "It has never been opened," Caldwell said quickly. "Not until last night." Wolfe's eyes lifted. Just slightly. Like a cat acknowledging movement. "And now?" Wolfe asked. "There's a man dead inside it. You could have heard a pin drop. Or Fritz slicing onions upstairs, which is about as close as he comes." Wolfe set his beer down with care. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "locked rooms are a vulgarity. People lie about them. Doors do not." Caldwell looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "The door was locked. From the outside. The key was in my possession." I leaned back in my chair. "Then either you killed him, Mr. Caldwell, or you're about to give us a better story." His eyes snapped to me. "I did not kill him." "No one ever does," I said pleasantly. Wolfe raised a hand. "Who is the deceased?" Caldwell hesitated. That was clue number 2. The first had been his eyes. The second was the pause. "His name was Victor Harlan," he said. "He had no right to be in that room." Wolfe's lips pressed together. "Rooms," he said, "do not concern themselves with rights. People do." "Why was the chamber forbidden?" "It was sealed after my father died," Caldwell said. "By my mother's orders." "And you obeyed," Wolfe said, "for 20 years." "And last night," Wolfe said, "you disobeyed." Caldwell's voice dropped. "I heard something." "Did you?" I said. "Or did you remember something?" He ignored me. "There was noise. A sound like someone striking wood." I unlocked the door. "Inside, you found a corpse," Wolfe said. "Spare us the theatrics. Who else lives in the house?" "My aunt. 2 servants. A business associate was visiting." "Names," Wolfe said. "Caldwell supplied them." I wrote them down. Wolfe listened, stored, filed. I could practically hear the mental drawers sliding shut. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said, you will visit the residence. Caldwell stiffened. The chamber will not be opened again, Wolfe finished. Until I say otherwise. That surprised both of us. Caldwell looked relieved. I didn't. Outside, the city was doing what it always does, honking taxis, shouting pedestrians, the smell of hot dogs and damp stone. I caught a cab uptown and watched the brownstone slide past like a row of secrets pretending to be respectable. Caldwell's house fit right in. Tall, narrow, old money trying to look immortal. The servants were nervous. Servants always are, but these were worse. One avoided the hallway entirely. Another crossed herself when I asked about the sealed room. It was forbidden, the maid whispered. Always forbidden. By whom? I asked. She hesitated. By everyone. The chamber was at the end of a corridor that smelled faintly of dust and polish. The door was thick oak, reinforced, old-fashioned. The lock was solid. Too solid. Inspector Kramer arrived while I was still admiring the workmanship. Goodwin, he growled. Your boss sniffing around? He's breathing, I said. Same as always. The room was locked, Kramer said. No windows. No secret passages. Medical examiner says the man died inside. I leaned closer to the door. Funny thing about secrets, Inspector. They get stale. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened without interruption. When I finished, he closed his eyes. The chamber, he said softly, was not built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in. What? I asked. Wolfe opened his eyes. That, he said, is what the door has been guarding. Upstairs, the orchids breathed quietly. Somewhere in New York, a house waited for a truth that didn't want to come out, and neither, apparently, did the door. Chapter 2, A House Built on Silence. If there's one thing New York does better than noise, it's pretending it didn't hear anything. The city can witness a parade, a mugging, a romance, and a corpse in the same afternoon and still go on selling pretzels like the whole thing is a stage rehearsal. Caldwell's brownstone on East 67th had the same talent, only it did it with chandeliers and a look of offended dignity that I went back the next morning with Wolfe's instructions tucked in my pocket like a warrant. Wolfe had stayed home, of course. His idea of fieldwork is inhaling orchid-scented air while other people sweat. But he had sharpened his curiosity last night like a knife on a whetstone, and now he wanted meat. Bring me facts, he'd said over breakfast. Not impressions. Impressions are for poets and idiots. Then I'll send you Kramer, I'd told him. He didn't smile. Wolfe rarely gives me the satisfaction. At the Caldwell house, a uniformed cop was still stationed outside, and the front steps had that tired, damp look stone gets in winter. The maid who answered, Marjorie, looked like she'd aged 3 years overnight. Oh, she said, as if I'd brought more trouble in my coat pockets. Mr. Goodwin. That's the idea, I said, stepping in. Where's our host? In the library. With Miss Bess. Miss who? Miss Bess Caldwell. His aunt. She lowered her voice like the walls were wired. She's upset. So was I. Not because of an upset aunt, those come free with old houses, but because she hadn't mentioned the aunt's first name yesterday, and servants don't forget names unless they're afraid to speak them. The library smelled of leather, old paper, and money that had never worked a day in its life. Leonard Caldwell was by the window, staring out at the street as if considering escape. Seated stiffly in a high-backed chair was his aunt, Bess Caldwell, thin, gray, and sharp enough to slice bread without a knife. Her eyes were on me like I'd tracked mud across her rug. Mr. Goodwin, Caldwell said. He looked like he hadn't slept, and in his case that wasn't a fashion choice. Morning, I said. I'm here to do what you folks seem allergic to, ask questions. Miss Bess's mouth tightened. This is an outrage, she said. My home, your home has a dead man in a sealed room, I said. That makes it a public inconvenience. Caldwell flinched. Miss Bess didn't. She had the sort of spine you get from practicing disapproval daily. I have spoken to the police, she said. There is no need for your employer's theatrical methods. Wolfe doesn't do theater, I said. He does conclusions. Theater is optional and usually provided by the client. Caldwell cleared his throat. Mr. Goodwin, please. Miss Bess is an obstacle, I said. I noticed. Her eyes sharpened. Young man, I'm not that young, I said. It's just the face. Caldwell stepped between us like a referee. We want this handled discreetly. That was a word I'd learned to mistrust. Discreet usually means we want the truth, but not the kind that stains our curtains. Discreet, I repeated. Sure. Then let's start with the room. I need to see it again. Miss Bess's fingers dug into the armrests. Absolutely not. Caldwell hesitated. The police didn't live with the room for 20 years, I said. You did. Wolfe needs to understand why you treated it like it was radioactive. Miss Bess stood. She was small, but she filled the room with indignation. That chamber was sealed by my sister for a reason. Your sister being Caldwell's mother, I said. Yes, she snapped. A woman of principle. Caldwell's face tightened at the word principle the way some men tighten at taxes. What was in the chamber? I asked. Nothing, Miss Bess said too quickly. That was clue number 1 for the morning. Caldwell tried to smooth it over. It was simply unpleasant. A storage room. Old things. Old things don't require a forbidden door, I said. They require mothballs. Miss Bess made a sound like a kettle about to scream. We are not discussing family matters with a stranger. You invited the stranger, I told her, because you got yourself a corpse. That's how the universe works. Caldwell rubbed his forehead. Mr. Goodwin, look, I said, easing back, I'll behave. I'll ask nicely. I'll even admire your drapes. But I'm going to see that door and I'm going to learn who Victor Harlan was to your family. At the name, Miss Bess's chin lifted as if she'd smelled something rotten. Victor Harlan, she said. A scavenger. He had no business in your house, I finished. Yet he ended up dead in the one room nobody enters. That's practically poetry. Caldwell swallowed. He was connected to my father's business. Connected how? Caldwell opened his mouth, then shut it. Miss Bess spoke for him. He was employed, she said coldly. Briefly. Then dismissed. Why? Miss Bess's eyes flashed. Because we dismissed him. That was clue number 2, we'd got alone. I would have meant personal dislike. We'd meant committee guilt that I pushed. Was he blackmailing someone? Caldwell's shoulders stiffened. Miss Bess's eyes didn't flicker, but her hand did, just a little twitch, like a reflex. No, Caldwell said, not even a little. I asked. Absolutely not. That was clue number 3, the speed of the denial. Honest people deny like they're swatting a fly. Liars deny like they're putting out a fire. Did I ask to see the corridor? Caldwell reluctantly led me out, Miss Bess following with the air of someone guarding a vault. The hallway was quieter in daylight, but it still had a stale, held breath quality. The forbidden door sat at the end like a judge waiting to sentence you. The lock had been examined by the police. There were faint scratches around it, newer than the rest of the door. Someone had tried a tool. Not last night, though. The scratches were older, a few weeks maybe, with dust settled into the grooves that I leaned in. This door's been tested. Caldwell blinked. Tested? Somebody's been trying to get in, I said. Or out. Miss Bess's face went rigid. Nonsense. I tapped the wood with my knuckle. Solid. Thick. Too thick for a simple storage room. And there was a faint smell, varnish, dust, and underneath it something metallic, like old coins or old blood. Caldwell's voice came tight. Please, Mr. Goodwin. Don't what? I asked. Listen to the house. It's been talking all morning. We went back to the library and met the other 2 pieces of the household puzzle, the butler, Henry Sloane, and a man who was too polished to be staff, Miles Varick, the visiting business associate Caldwell had mentioned. Varick smiled at me with the easy warmth of a man who could sell umbrellas in a drought. Mr. Goodwin. I've heard of you. Try not to, I said. That he laughed like I'd told a great joke. It didn't reach his eyes. I'm assisting Leonard, Varick said. This is a delicate matter. The family name is doing fine, I said. It's the family secrets that are sweating. Caldwell shot me a warning look. Miss Bess's lips thinned. Varick's smile held, but I saw his jaw tighten just a fraction. Where were you last night? I asked Varick. That he didn't hesitate. In the guest room. I retired early. Anyone see you? Henry brought me tea, Varick said smoothly. Around 9. I turned to the butler. Did you? Henry Sloane's face was bland as wallpaper. Yes, sir. I studied him. Bland faces are useful, they hide everything. But his eyes flicked, just once, toward Miss Bess when he answered. A quick check for approval, that told me plenty. Henry answered to the aunt more than the nephew. That I excused myself and made a call from the hall phone to the brownstone. Fritz's voice answered first, cheerful, as always, because Fritz lives in a universe where the worst crime is overcooked sauce. Then Wolfe came on. Report, he demanded. That I gave it to him. The aunt's hostility, Caldwell's evasions, Varick's too perfect calm, the old tool scratches, Henry's loyalty shift, the way Victor Harlan's name made the air colder. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for Wolfe to sip beer. In my imagination, Mr. Goodwin, he said at last, you have confirmed my suspicion. Oh. I said. That I'm underpaid? That the chamber is not merely forbidden, Wolfe said. It is guarded. By fear. By habit. And by a secret that is shared. I looked down the quiet corridor. Somewhere beyond that thick oak door, a dead man lay like punctuation at the end of a sentence written 20 years ago. And what do I do now? I asked. That Wolfe's voice turned crisp. You will find out what Victor Harlan wanted. I smiled, because sometimes all you can do is smile at the city's appetite for trouble. Yes, sir, I said. And if it's something that fits inside a locked room, it will fit inside human nature, Wolfe said. Everything does. When I hung up, the house seemed even quieter, as if it had been listening too. In Midtown, taxis honked and life went on. But in that corridor, behind that door, the past was still holding its breath, and something told me it was about to exhale. Chapter 3, Those Who Guard the Past. By the third day of a case, the people involved usually split into two camps, those who want answers and those who want the questions to go away. At the Caldwell house, the second camp had a healthy membership and a strict dress code. That I spent the morning doing what Wolfe calls useful agitation. That's where I poke people in sequence and see which ones jump. Wolfe stayed home, of course, upstairs with the orchids, downstairs with the beer, and mentally miles ahead of me. Our division of labor has always been clear. I stir the pot, he tastes the soup and tells me what's poisoning it. The first jumper was Miss Bess. That I found her in the drawing room, seated bolt upright with a book she wasn't reading. She had the posture of a woman who had spent decades keeping doors closed, literal and otherwise. Good morning, I said cheerfully. Sleep well? I did not, she said. This house has been disturbed. By a corpse, I agreed. That'll do it. Her eyes snapped to mine. You are insolent. Occupational hazard. I sat across from her without being invited. That bothered her more than my tone. Let's talk about Victor Harlan. I have nothing to say about that man. That's a lot of nothing, I said. Considering he died in your family's private tomb. Her lips thinned. My sister was a good woman. I'm sure, I said. Good women still have bad days. Or bad partners. She stiffened. Victor Harlan exploited my brother-in-law's weaknesses. Which were? Sentiment, she said sharply. And foolish loyalty. That was interesting. People rarely accuse the dead of sentiment unless it cost someone else dearly. So Harlan was dismissed, I said. But not forgotten. Miss Bess closed her book with finality. The past should remain sealed. Funny, I said. That's exactly what the chamber did. Her gaze drifted, just for a heartbeat, toward the corridor. It was enough that I left her stewing and went to find Leonard Caldwell, who was pacing the library like a man trying to wear a groove into the carpet. "You look busy," I said. "I'm trying to keep this under control," he snapped. "That makes one of us." I leaned against a shelf and watched him pace. "Tell me about your father." He stopped. "Why?" "Because dead men have a way of complicating things," I said. "And your father seems to be complicating this from beyond the grave." Caldwell exhaled. "He was difficult. Most people worth killing are," I said. "By someone, at least." He shot me a look. "He made mistakes." "Financial?" "Yes." "Moral?" Caldwell hesitated. "That was my opening, Harlan," I said. "He knew about them." Caldwell ran a hand through his hair. "Harlan handled certain transactions. Discreetly." "Discreet is the word of the week," I said. "Did your father cheat anyone?" "Yes," Caldwell said, quietly. "And Harlan helped him do it." There it was. The first solid brick in the wall, so why kill him now? I asked. Caldwell's eyes flicked to the door. "I didn't." "I know," I said. "But someone who knew that secret did." I left him there, sweating honesty for the first time, and found Henry Sloane in the pantry polishing silver that was already too clean. "Henry," I said, "you're a loyal man." He froze just a fraction. "I do my duty." "To whom?" I asked. That he kept polishing. "To the family." "All of them?" His hand slowed. "Miss Bess has managed the household since Mrs. Caldwell passed." "Ah," I said. "So the orders come from her." "She understands the house," Henry said carefully. "Its traditions. And its locked rooms." He didn't answer. But his eyes did, sliding away like they were ashamed to look at the truth. "Did Victor Harlan ever come here before?" I asked. "Yes," Henry said, too fast. "How often?" "Years ago," he said. "Only once." "That's a lie," I said mildly. He stiffened. "I beg your pardon." "He came more than once," I said. "And not as a guest." Henry's jaw tightened. "He came to see Mr. Caldwell Sr. In secret." "Where did they meet?" Henry swallowed. "In the chamber." There it was, the forbidden room as a confessional. Or a bank vault. Or both. "Why seal it?" I asked. "After Mr. Caldwell Sr. died," Henry said, "Miss Bess insisted." "Because?" I pressed. "Because," he said, "some things were better left unseen." I thanked him and went hunting for the last suspect, Miles Varick. I found him in the dining room, enjoying coffee like he owned the place. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. "Please," he said warmly. "You look like a man who needs caffeine." "I look like a man who needs honesty," I said, sitting. "From you." He smiled. "I've always admired directness." "Then you'll love this," I said. "What was Victor Harlan holding over this family?" Varick stirred his coffee slowly. "Blackmail is such an ugly word." "So is murder," I said. His smile faded. "Harlan was a parasite." "Parasites don't live 20 years without cooperation," I said. "What did he want?" "Money," Varick said. Silence. "And last night?" Varick's eyes hardened. "He wanted more." "From you?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to be noticeable. "From Leonard." That was contradiction number one. Earlier he'd implied Harlan was a relic, long gone. "Where were you when Harlan died?" I asked. "I told you," he said. "My room." "Alone?" "Yes." I nodded. "Funny thing. Henry remembers bringing you tea at 9. But he doesn't remember you drinking it." Varick's jaw tightened. "Is that so?" I said. "And Miss Bess says no one touched the chamber in 20 years. Henry says that's not true." Varick leaned back. "You're fishing." "Sure," I said. "But I've got a bite." I left him staring into his coffee and took a cab back to the brownstone. New York rolled past the window in shadows and neon, like it was in on the joke. At home, Wolfe was exactly where he belonged: armchair, beer, orchid-scented air heavy with judgment. Well, he said that I gave him everything: the father's fraud, Harlan's role, the chamber meetings, Miss Bess's authority, Varick's convenient solitude, Henry's divided loyalties. Wolfe closed his eyes. One of them lies, he said. Not about the murder. About what, then? I asked. About the chamber's purpose, Wolfe said. It was not merely a place of meetings. It was a repository. For what? I asked. Evidence, Wolfe said softly. Or confession. Or both. He opened his eyes and fixed me with a look that usually precedes fireworks. Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow you will return. Of course, I said. And then? Then, Wolfe said, we shall see who has been guarding the past, and who has been feeding it. Upstairs, the orchids breathed quietly. Outside, a taxi honked. Somewhere between those two sounds, a truth was getting restless, and the door that never opened was beginning to remember how. Chapter 4, The Thing Inside the Chamber. By the fourth day, the case had developed a personality, and it wasn't a friendly one. It sulked, withheld information, and snapped at you when you got too close. Wolfe loves cases like that. I don't. I prefer my mysteries cooperative or at least honest about their hostility. Wolfe was already irritated before breakfast, which is never a good sign. Fritz had prepared kidneys and bacon to perfection, the orchids had been tended with military precision, and yet Wolfe sat scowling into his coffee like it had personally offended him. Mr. Goodwin, he said, today we cease circling the chamber. That sounds decisive, I said. Or illegal. Neither, Wolfe replied. It is inevitable. He slid a sheet of paper across the desk. You will demand a full inventory of the chamber's contents. I blinked. Demand? Yes. From whom? Everyone. I grinned. I'll bring my shouting voice. The Caldwell house was quieter than before, which I took as a bad sign. Houses that go quiet are usually listening. I found Leonard Caldwell in the library again, still pacing, still wearing anxiety like an ill-fitting coat. Leonard, I said, Wolfe wants a list. A list? He asked. Everything that was in the chamber, I said. Before the body. After the body. And anything you forgot to mention. He frowned. The police already took what they noticed, I said. Wolfe wants what you noticed but didn't mention. Miss Bess arrived mid-sentence, her expression already set to frost. This is harassment. This is bookkeeping, I said. A corpse requires paperwork. Her eyes glittered. The chamber contained old files. Boxes. Furniture. Names, I said. Dates. She stiffened. Why? Because something in that room didn't belong, I said. And Wolfe doesn't like clutter. That got a reaction. Miss Bess's fingers tightened on her handbag. Caldwell looked between us like a man watching his inheritance wobble. The chamber, Miss Bess said slowly, was my sister's responsibility. Then she stocked it, I said. And someone else emptied it. Silence fell. The servants hovered in doorways like nervous punctuation marks. Finally, Caldwell sighed. There was a ledger. Miss Bess shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. Leonard, a ledger? I said. That's the first interesting word I've heard all morning. It recorded payments, Caldwell said. From my father's businesses. To whom? I asked. Caldwell swallowed. Off the book's recipients. Victor Harlan, I said. Yes. Miss Bess sat down abruptly. That was clue number 1. And? I pressed. And others, Caldwell admitted. Where is it now? I asked. Caldwell shook his head. It wasn't there last night. That was clue number 2. That I asked to see the chamber again. Miss Bess objected, Henry hesitated, and Varick smiled politely like a man watching a card trick he already knew the ending to. In the end, the police escort still stationed nearby made the decision for them. The door opened, the chamber smelled different without the body, emptier, but also more exposed. Like a confession booth after the sinner leaves. The walls were bare brick. A table stood in the center. A few filing cabinets. A chair. And dust, lots of it. Except in one place. On the tabletop was a clean rectangle, sharply defined. Something had sat there for years and been removed recently. I leaned close. That's where the ledger lived. Henry cleared his throat. I never saw a ledger. I know, I said. That's why you're nervous. In one corner, tucked behind a cabinet, I noticed something else, a small metal object, dull and unremarkable. I picked it up carefully. It was a key, not the key to the chamber. That one was larger, ceremonial. This was slim, modern. Anybody recognize this? I asked. And no one did. Or pretended not to. That's funny, I said. Because it doesn't belong here. Miss Bess's gaze dropped to it for a fraction of a second too long. That was clue number 3. I pocketed the key and left before the chamber decided to accuse someone on its own. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened in silence, fingers steepled, eyes half closed. I laid it all out, the missing ledger, the dust rectangle, the extra key, Miss Bess's reaction. When I finished, Wolfe said, "You will not return to the chamber." I stared. "Excuse me." "It would be unwise," Wolfe said. "The next event will not be informational. It will be preventative." "That sounds cheerful," I said. "Care to explain?" No, that was Wolfe's way of telling me he'd seen something dangerous forming and didn't feel like sharing the view yet. That I spent the evening killing time at a diner on 9th Avenue, nursing bad coffee and worse patients. Around 10, the phone rang. "Goodwin," Kramer barked. "Get back to the Caldwell place. Now." When I arrived, the street was lit up like a Christmas tree. Police cars. Neighbors gawking. A familiar bad smell in the air. Not literal, but you learn to recognize it. Inside, Henry the butler sat on a chair, pale and shaking. Miss Bess stood rigid, defiant. Caldwell looked like he might faint. Varick was absent. What happened? I asked Kramer. "Someone tried to break into the chamber," he said. "From the inside." I blinked. "That's impressive." "They didn't succeed," Kramer said. "But they made enough noise to bring half the house running." I thought of the scratches around the lock. Old ones. "Practice, where's Varick?" I asked. Kramer frowned. "Not here." That was clue number 4, and it came with sirens. I phoned Wolfe from the hall. He answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been waiting. "It's begun," I said. "Yes," Wolfe replied. The object removed from the chamber was not merely evidence. It was leverage. "And now someone wants more," I said. "Or wants to erase the past entirely," Wolfe corrected. "Should I go back in?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said sharply. "Observe only." Tonight's incident was an attempt to reseal the truth. It failed. I looked down the corridor toward the door that never opened, now scarred, offended, and stubbornly silent. "Wolfe," I said, "someone's getting desperate." "Indeed," he replied. "And desperation produces errors." When I hung up, I realized the case had shifted. We weren't just uncovering a secret anymore. We were racing it. The chamber had given up one thing already. Whatever else it held, someone was willing to risk prison, or worse, to keep it buried, and that meant we were finally getting close. Chapter 5, A Lie Older Than the Lock. By the 5th day, the case had started to smell like old paper and colder motives. Wolfe says time reveals truth the way heat reveals flaws in steel. I say time just gives liars more chances to trip over themselves. Either way, Wolfe had decided it was time to stop asking what happened last night and start asking what happened 20 years ago, which meant, naturally, that I got to do the legwork while he stayed home with the orchids. The morning began with Wolfe in full domestic command. Fritz served breakfast like a sacrament, the orchids glowed upstairs like they were eavesdropping, and Wolfe sat in his red leather chair, massive and immovable, dictating my itinerary as if the city were his chessboard. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "you will investigate the death of Arthur Caldwell." "That's Leonard's father," I said. "He's been dead 2 decades. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "And remarkably convenient ever since." I grinned. "You want me to dig up a corpse?" "Metaphorically," Wolfe said. "I dislike dirt under my nails." He handed me a list, bank names, law firms, dates. The sort of list that doesn't exist unless someone worked very hard to make it disappear. Victor Harlan, Wolfe continued, was not merely a blackmailer. He was a custodian. Of the ledger, I said. Of guilt, Wolfe corrected. Find out whose. So I did what any obedient assistant does. I put on my coat, grabbed a cab, and let New York remind me why it never forgets, just pretends to. The first stop was a law office on Madison Avenue that had changed its name twice since the 20s but still smelled the same: ink, dust, and regret. The senior partner remembered Arthur Caldwell well enough. Once I nudged him with Wolfe's reputation. Caldwell, the lawyer said. Ah yes. Charitable. Influential. Careless. Careless how? I asked. The man leaned back. He trusted people who knew where the bodies were buried. Did he bury any? I asked. The lawyer hesitated. That was enough of an answer that I left with copies of old trust documents that had been quietly amended after Caldwell's death, beneficiaries rearranged, payments halted. One name kept recurring in the margins, crossed out, reinserted, then crossed out again: Victor Harlan. Next came a bank on Wall Street, where an elderly clerk remembered Harlan as a man who never smiled but always got paid. Paid for what? I asked. The clerk shrugged. Silence. By lunchtime, I had enough paper to wallpaper Wolfe's office. I ate a sandwich at a diner, watching steam rise from coffee cups and thinking about how many men had bought silence in that city, and how few had ever owned it. Back at the Caldwell house, the atmosphere had curdled. Miss Bess was sharper than ever, Leonard was unraveling, and Henry looked like a man who'd realized loyalty was a poor pension plan. I found Leonard alone in the study, staring at an old photograph. Your father? I asked. Yes, he said. Before everything. Before what? I asked. He laughed bitterly. Before Victor Harlan. That was new. Your father brought Harlan in, I said. Leonard nodded. After a scandal. One that would have destroyed him, and us. What kind? I asked. Leonard hesitated, then spoke quietly. Arthur Caldwell diverted funds. Charity money. He meant to replace it. He never did. And Harlan? I asked. He discovered it, Leonard said. He didn't report it. He offered management. 20 years of management, I said. That's a long contract. Leonard's eyes dropped. My aunt insisted the chamber be sealed after father died. She said it was cleansing. Or containment. I said that. He looked at me sharply. What do you mean? Nothing yet, I said. But someone kept paying Harlan long after your father was buried. Leonard went pale. That's impossible. Check the bank records, I said. Someone kept the past on life support. I left him staring at the photograph like it might start talking. Miss Bess was harder. I found her in the parlor, hands folded, face composed like a judge waiting for court to resume. You're enjoying this, she said. Not especially, I replied. But you're enjoying hiding. She stiffened. I protected this family. By feeding Harlan? I asked. Her eyes flashed. You know nothing. I know you ordered the chamber sealed, I said. But you didn't cut off the payments. Why? She stood, trembling, not with fear, but with fury. Because Arthur's disgrace would have destroyed us all. Even after his death. I pressed. Yes, she said. Especially after his death. And Leonard? I asked. Did he know? She looked away. That was answer enough. Henry confirmed it later, quietly, in the pantry. Miss Bess handled the arrangements, he said. Harlan was accommodated. Until when? I asked. Until recently, Henry said. When Mr. Harlan demanded something new. Which was? I asked. Henry swallowed. The ledger. He wanted it removed. Why? I asked. So he could leave, Henry said. And take everything with him. That explained the missing object. It also explained desperation. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, beer untouched. That never happens unless something serious is clicking into place. That I gave him the whole ugly picture, the charity fraud, the long-term hush payments, Miss Bess's control, Leonard's ignorance, Harlan's final demand. When I finished, Wolfe nodded once. The murder, he said, was not born of rage. No, I agreed. It was born of inevitability. Indeed, Wolfe said. Mr. Harlan ceased to be useful. And became dangerous, I added. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. One suspect, he said, is already eliminated. Who? I asked. That he waved a hand. Not yet. But tonight, I will speak privately with one of them. That worried me. Wolfe's private conversations tend to end with psychological wreckage. Should I be there? I asked. No, Wolfe said. Your presence would dilute the effect. I left him brooding in his chair, the orchids casting long shadows like witnesses who'd seen too much. Outside, a taxi honked and sped off, carrying someone else's troubles. As I headed upstairs, I realized the case had reached a turning point. The lie that sealed the chamber was older than the lock itself, and it had taken 20 years, a corpse, and a missing ledger to crack it. Someone in that house had been guarding the past not out of loyalty, but fear, and fear, I'd learned, makes people do very tidy murders. Tomorrow, Wolfe would tighten the screws, and somebody was going to start slipping. Chapter 6, The Locked Room That Wasn't. By the 6th day, the case had stopped pretending to be polite. It had teeth now. Sharp ones. And Wolfe, who has a lifelong appreciation for dangerous puzzles, as long as they don't interfere with dinner, was in a rare mood that meant somebody's comfortable illusion was about to be repossessed. The morning began exactly on schedule, which should have warned me. When Wolfe adheres too precisely to routine, it's usually because he's already solved half the problem and doesn't want interruptions while he disassembles the rest. Fritz served breakfast. The orchids were glowing upstairs like smug accomplices. Wolfe sat in his red leather armchair, immovable as a courthouse, hands steepled, eyes alert. Mr. Goodwin, he said, today we demolish the locked room. I perked up. With explosives or logic? Logic, Wolfe said. Explosives are vulgar and invite paperwork. He gestured for me to sit. The chamber, he continued, was never truly locked in the manner advertised. I waited. Wolfe enjoys making people wait. It's his version of foreplay, you told me, I said, that doors don't lie. People do. Precisely, Wolfe said. And the people involved have been lying about when the door was locked. That got my attention. The scratches on the lock, Wolfe went on, were not made during an escape attempt. They were practice. For what? I asked. For locking the door convincingly after the fact, Wolfe said. The illusion of impossibility. I leaned back. So the murder didn't happen in a sealed chamber. No, Wolfe said calmly. The chamber was sealed after the murder. That fit. Too neatly. I thought of the noises Caldwell heard. The delay. The convenient panic. Someone staged it, I said. Someone, Wolfe agreed, with access, patience, and the confidence that no one would question the ritual. Miss Bess, I said. Henry. Maybe Varick. Wolfe raised a finger. Not so fast. The timing is critical. Mr. Harlan was killed during a window when multiple individuals could plausibly account for their movements, yet none can verify another's. That's generous, I said. Sounds like a family tradition. Wolfe ignored that. Mr. Harlan entered the chamber alive. He did not die there. I blinked. But the body was placed there later, Wolfe finished. The room was used not as a crime scene, but as a stage. That explained the missing ledger, the dust rectangle, the desperate relocking attempt. The murderer needed the chamber silent, not inaccessible, just unquestioned, and the key I found. I asked, is not to the chamber, Wolfe said. It is to a filing cabinet. I sat up. The ledger wasn't removed in a hurry. No, Wolfe said. It was removed deliberately. Which meant forethought. An opportunity that I was halfway through a mental suspect parade when the phone rang. Wolfe answered, listened, and frowned. Inspector Kramer will be arriving shortly, he said. He has located Mr. Miles Varick. alive? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Unfortunately. Varick arrived an hour later, escorted but not cuffed, still wearing that polished calm like it was a tailored suit. Kramer followed, scowling like a man who resents intellect when it beats him to the punch. You've got something, Wolfe? Kramer demanded. I have clarity, Wolfe said. Which you lack. Varick smiled thinly. Charming. Mr. Varick, Wolfe said, you left the Caldwell residence on the night of the murder. I told you, you retired early, Wolfe interrupted. Yes. And then departed. Varick hesitated. Just a fraction. Enough. You visited a storage facility, Wolfe continued. One that accepts cash and asks no questions. Kramer blinked. We didn't know that. You did not think to ask, Wolfe said. Varick's smile vanished. You can't prove. I can, Wolfe said, because you accessed a unit registered to Victor Harlan. That did it. Varick's composure cracked, not shattered, but chipped. The ledger, Wolfe said. You removed it before Mr. Harlan's death. Kramer turned on him. You stole evidence. Varick straightened. I safeguarded it. For whom? I asked. Varick glanced at me, then at Wolfe. For the family. Wolfe snorted. For yourself. The ledger is leverage. And you plan to disappear with it, I said. After Harlan died, Wolfe corrected. He was to be eliminated, quietly, without scandal. Kramer leaned in. Did you kill him? No, Varick snapped. But I knew it would happen. That was a confession of a different sort. Wolfe waved a hand. Mr. Varick is not our murderer, he said. Kramer frowned. You sure? Absolutely, Wolfe said. He lacks the necessary emotional investment. That stung Varick more than an accusation. So who did it? Kramer demanded. Patience, Wolfe said. We are dismantling the mechanism, not announcing the result. Kramer grumbled but stayed. He knows when Wolfe's circling prey. That afternoon, Wolfe sent me back to the Caldwell house, not to investigate, but to observe. The mood had shifted. Miss Bess was brittle. Leonard was exhausted. Henry avoided eye contact like it was contagious. I watched them interact. Who deferred? Who commanded? Who feared exposure more than arrest? Miss Bess controlled the house, but Leonard controlled the money now. Henry controlled access. And someone, only one, had controlled timing. That was the key. Back at the brownstone that evening, Wolfe listened as I reported the dynamics. The murderer, Wolfe said, did not act in anger, greed, or panic. Then why? I asked. To preserve a fiction, Wolfe said. That the chamber was inviolate. That the past was contained. And Harlan threatened that. I said. Yes, Wolfe said. Not by speaking, but by leaving. That clicked. If Harlan took the ledger and vanished, the secret might surface without control. Silence bought by proximity is fragile, so they killed him, I said. And put him back where he belonged. In the chamber, Wolfe said. As punctuation. The phone rang again. Kramer. Wolfe listened, then smiled faintly. Excellent, Wolfe said. Yes. Bring them all tomorrow. He hung up and leaned back, satisfied. What now? I asked. Now, Wolfe said, we gather our suspects. The big speech? I asked. The inevitable one, Wolfe said. Upstairs, the orchids breathed in approval. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent and complicit. The locked room had lost its mystery. All that remained was the motive, and tomorrow, someone would finally understand that the door had never been the problem, that it was the lie guarding it. Chapter 7, Wolfe's Uncomfortable Truth. If you've never watched Nero Wolfe prepare for a confrontation, you might imagine fireworks, shouting, maybe a dramatic gesture or two. You'd be wrong. Wolfe prepares the way a surgeon does, by washing his hands, arranging his tools, and deciding precisely where to cut. The morning of the seventh day began with absolute normalcy, which is Wolfe's favorite disguise for impending catastrophe. Breakfast was served at the proper hour. Fritz moved with his usual solemn grace, the coffee was flawless, and Wolfe occupied his red leather armchair like a granite monument to routine. Upstairs, the orchids exhaled damp, judgmental air. I knew better than to interrupt. Finally, Wolfe looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, he said, today we offend several people profoundly. Music to my ears, I said. Do I get to help? You will remain visible, Wolfe said. Your impatience will be useful. I took that as a compliment. From Wolfe, it probably was. By noon, they began arriving. Leonard Caldwell came first, pale and strained, his tie knotted too tightly. Miss Bess followed, rigid, impeccably dressed, carrying herself like a woman attending her own vindication. Henry Sloane entered quietly, eyes down, hands folded, still the perfect servant, though the cracks were showing. Inspector Kramer arrived with professional irritation. Miles Varick was last, escorted, polite, and watchful. Wolfe had them seated in his office, arranged not for comfort but for visibility. He likes suspects where he can see them all at once, like specimens pinned to a board. That I took my place by my desk, notebook in hand, feeling like a ringmaster's assistant waiting for the lions to start misbehaving. Wolfe waited until Fritz had served beer and withdrawn. Only then did he speak. You are all here, Wolfe said calmly, because Victor Harlan is dead. No one objected. That, in itself, was interesting. Mr. Harlan, Wolfe continued, was not murdered impulsively. He was removed. Leonard shifted. Mr. Wolfe, please, Wolfe said, raising a hand. I will speak. You may endure. That shut him up. For 20 years, Wolfe said, this family maintained a fiction. That the forbidden chamber was sealed to preserve dignity. In fact, it preserved fear. Miss Bess drew herself up. I protected my sister's memory. You protected exposure, Wolfe corrected. A distinction with consequences. Her lips tightened. You presume too much. Wolfe inclined his head. I presume nothing. I deduce. He turned his gaze to Henry. You obeyed Miss Bess. Henry nodded once. Yes, sir. You facilitated meetings in the chamber, Wolfe said. You accepted payments to ensure silence. Henry's face drained of color. You will speak later, Wolfe said. Or not at all. Henry closed his mouth. Wolfe turned next to Leonard. You inherited the consequences of your father's actions without knowledge of their extent. Leonard swallowed. I didn't know. Indeed, Wolfe said. That ignorance preserved your usefulness. Leonard looked up sharply. To whom? Wolfe didn't answer him. Instead, he shifted his bulk slightly, an unmistakable sign he was reaching the pressure point. Victor Harlan, Wolfe said, was not killed in the chamber. Kramer leaned forward. You're sure? Yes, Wolfe said. He died elsewhere and was placed there. Miss Bess stiffened. Varick's eyes flicked, just once, to her. I caught it. Wolfe did too. The locked room, Wolfe continued, was an illusion constructed after the fact. The real crime was not murder. It was preservation. Preservation of what? Leonard demanded. Wolfe looked at him. A lie. Silence fell like dust. Wolfe folded his hands. Mr. Harlan intended to leave. With the ledger. With proof. Varick shifted. You've already established, I have established that you removed the ledger, Wolfe said. But you were not the murderer. Varick exhaled slowly. Relief, quickly masked. You lacked motive, Wolfe said. Exposure would not destroy you. It would inconvenience you. Varick bristled. That's not fatal, Wolfe finished. Mr. Harlan's departure endangered someone else. Wolfe turned, deliberately, to Miss Bess. She met his gaze without flinching. You, Wolfe said, could not allow the ledger to surface. Her voice was cold. You have no proof. Proof, Wolfe said, is a vulgar necessity. Understanding is sufficient. Leonard stared at her. Aunt Bess. Wolfe continued, relentless. You controlled the household. You controlled Henry. You authorized payments. And when Mr. Harlan demanded final release, you arranged a solution. Miss Bess rose. This is slander. Wolfe did not raise his voice. You did not strike the blow. That stopped her, Kramer frowned. Then who did? Wolfe smiled faintly. The person who believed obedience was duty, and silence was virtue. All eyes turned to Henry. Henry's hands trembled. I didn't mean, Miss Bess whirled on him. You promised, Wolfe cut in sharply. Enough. Henry collapsed into the chair, shoulders sagging. She told me it was necessary, he said. That Mr. Harlan would ruin everything. That the family, you killed him to preserve order, Wolfe said. And you locked him away like an object. Henry nodded, broken. Yes. Leonard stood, shaken. All these years. Wolfe's voice softened, just a fraction. The Forbidden Chamber was never about secrecy, he said. It was about control. Kramer rose, already signaling an officer. Miss Bess stood frozen, pride finally cracking. I did what was required. Wolfe looked at her with something like disdain. You did what was convenient. As Henry was led away, the room exhaled. Leonard sat heavily. Varick looked down, calculating his escape routes. Miss Bess stared straight ahead, defeated but unrepentant. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied but unsmiling. The truth, he said, is often uncomfortable. That is why people lock it away. I watched them file out, each carrying a piece of the wreckage. Outside, a taxi honked. Life resumed. That I turned to Wolfe. Nice work. He waved it off. Tomorrow, he said, we will conclude matters. Tomorrow? I asked. You just blew the roof off. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. No, Mr. Goodwin. Today we exposed the structure. He reached for his beer. Tomorrow, he said, we open the door completely. Upstairs, the orchids breathed, indifferent and eternal, and somewhere between justice and regret, the Forbidden Chamber was finally running out of shadows. Chapter 8, When the Door Finally Opens. By the 8th day, the case had gone quiet in that peculiar way that only follows a storm. The kind of quiet that isn't peace so much as debris settling. New York did what it always does, kept moving, but inside the Caldwell affair, everything had reached the point where motion was no longer optional. Wolfe was in his chair, as always, but there was a difference. He had the look of a man who has already said goodbye to a problem and is merely waiting for the clock to agree with him. Fritz moved softly in the kitchen. The orchids upstairs were serene, which I've learned to interpret as approval. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said without looking at me, today we conclude. Arrests already made, I said. Confession secured. What's left? Wolfe lifted his eyes. Accuracy. That was Wolfe's version of unfinished business. Inspector Kramer arrived shortly after, smelling of cold air and victory. Henry's confession checks out, he said. Physical evidence lines up. Cause of death, blunt trauma. He struck Harlan in the pantry, not the chamber. Wolfe nodded. As expected. Kramer frowned. But Miss Bess hasn't been charged. She insists she never ordered the killing. She did not, Wolfe said. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Quite, Wolfe replied. Her crime was orchestration, not violence. She cultivated obedience. Henry supplied the rest. Kramer grunted. That'll play in court. Wolfe waved him off. The law is your concern, Inspector. Mine is truth. Which meant, of course, that we were going back to the Caldwell house. The brownstone looked smaller somehow, like a proud animal that had been caged and finally noticed it. Leonard Caldwell met us at the door. He looked older, but clearer, like a man who'd lost something heavy he'd been carrying without knowing it. I want it opened, he said. That we all knew what he meant. The corridor was brighter than before, the curtains pulled back. The forbidden door stood at the end, no longer guarded by superstition, just wood and metal doing an honest job. Leonard produced the key. His hand trembled. You don't have to, I said. Yes, he replied. I do. The lock turned. The door opened. There was nothing dramatic inside now. No body. No ledger. No secrets crouching in the corners. Just brick walls, a table, filing cabinets, and dust, ordinary dust, finally allowed to exist, Leonard stepped in slowly, like a man entering a childhood nightmare and finding it smaller than remembered. This room, Wolfe said quietly, was never forbidden because it was dangerous. Leonard turned to him. Then why? Because it reminded your aunt of a moment when control nearly slipped away, Wolfe said. And she built a religion around that fear. Leonard nodded. And Victor Harlan? Was the high priest, I said. Paid to keep the gods quiet. Leonard almost smiled at that. Almost, Kramer cleared his throat. Case is closed as far as I'm concerned. Wolfe shook his head. Not yet. He stepped, or rather shifted, just enough to indicate the filing cabinet. The ledger. Kramer blinked. Varick had it last. Indeed, Wolfe said. And he returned it this morning. That got everyone's attention. Returned? I said. Wolfe inclined his head. He understands the value of cooperation. Kramer swore under his breath. Where is it? Wolfe gestured to Leonard. Mr. Caldwell. Leonard opened the cabinet. Inside, neatly placed, was the ledger, old, worn, unimpressive looking for something that had controlled so many lives. Leonard lifted it with care. This ruined us. No, Wolfe said gently. This revealed you. There is a difference. Leonard closed the book. What happens now? Wolfe considered him. You decide whether truth ends with confession or continues with restitution. Leonard nodded slowly. I'll make it right. Wolfe inclined his head once. That was his version of respect. Back at the brownstone that evening, the city felt lighter. Maybe it was just me. Wolfe sat in his chair, beer in hand, satisfied but not triumphant. Wolfe never gloats. Triumph is inefficient, so, I said, dropping into my chair, what finally cracked it for you? Wolfe took a sip. The chamber. Because it wasn't locked? I asked. Because it was revered, Wolfe said. People do not revere empty rooms. They revere symbols. And the symbol was fear, I said. Control, Wolfe corrected. Fear is merely the tool. I nodded. And Henry? A man trained to obey, Wolfe said. Obedience, when elevated above judgment, becomes lethal. That's cheerful, I said. Wolfe ignored me. Mr. Harlan believed proximity equaled safety. He was wrong. I thought of the ledger, the long years of silence, the body returned to the place it never belonged. You know, I said, for a room nobody was supposed to enter, it caused a lot of traffic. Wolfe allowed himself the faintest smile. Doors, he said, invite curiosity. Locked ones invite obsession. Later, after dinner, I went upstairs. The orchids were glowing softly, white and indifferent. I stood there a moment, breathing in the humid air. The forbidden chamber was empty now. Truly empty. No lies. No leverage. No corpse pretending to be punctuation. Some rooms are locked with keys. Others with shame. This one had finally been opened, not by force, but by truth. Downstairs, Wolfe cleared his throat, a reminder that routine had resumed, case closed, and the door that never opened, it didn't need to anymore.